Hey maggots, and welcome to our holiday cooking series. Now, hopefully you're gonna find this both informative and entertaining, kind of like our show, except for the part when Dawn talks. We call that filler. So here's the idea. Whether you've been doing this forever or you've never done it, entertaining and cooking for groups of people is intimidating to everyone and nerve-wracking. Even people like me that have been doing it for 25 years. It's exhilarating, but you're still anxious and nervous. You want to get everything right. If you're a novice, if you're nervous, if you've never hosted before, I promise you, if you follow my recipes and instructions, everything's going to be fine. Now, if you're a little more advanced, make it fun. That's what cooking is all about. Take my recipes and go, I think this would make Rob's recipe a little better. I want to try this. All of my recipes came from someone else's ideas and then I added to them. That's the fun of cooking. Also, keep in mind, if you see me cooking for, say, servings of 2 or 4, and you're like, wait a minute, I have to serve 12 people, just triple everything. Also, if you get overwhelmed by the measurements, Google is fantastic at helping you with the conversions. Another trick, if you're using an oven and you only have one oven, remember, if you put more than one thing in that oven, everything cooks slower. And finally, remember the most important thing about having fun when you're cooking: alcohol. Let's cook. Hey maggots, welcome to the next edition of our holiday cooking series. This time we're going to work on the perfect holiday turkey gravy. Now, you remember, if you watched the video before about where we cleaned out the turkey, we're gonna start with where we left off there with your wonderful innards. These are the gizzards, the heart, the neck, the intestine. I don't know what's in there. It's really gross stuff, but it imparts amazing flavor when it's cooked down, which is where you get an incredible gravy from. And actually, it's a little less complicated than a lot of people think. Now, here's how the recipe goes if you actually read it, and this is from like 10, 15 years ago. You can make it as simple or as complicated as you want. Here's the most simple way you can do it. You can use chicken bouillon cubes. So you take a couple of these and you just fill this pot with water, let it boil, and then after you boil it, you bring it down to a simmer, and then you let it go for hours. I recommend at least 3 to 4 hours. I cook mine sometimes for as much as 8. And every time the water level gets low, you add more water, and then you can add another bouillon cube as you go. I don't do it this way anymore. It will still work. There's a variety of reasons I don't do this anymore. 1, it adds a lot of salt to your gravy, which you want to be careful about. 2, I think there's a way to make this even richer. So that's one idea, and that's the way the original recipe was written. Here's another thing you can do. You can get over-the-counter chicken broth instead of water. No bouillon cubes. Add that to the pot, and it's the same idea. You're gonna bring it to a boil, and then you're gonna simmer it for 3 to 4 hours, adding more of this as you go. Yeah, it's more expensive. Broth costs more than water, but it imparts a flavor because you're already adding some more chicken flavor to it. Or, if you're lucky enough to have this on hand, you can do what I do. And I only started this a few years ago, and I just love the richness that it brings out. You take your disgusting innards, and you take your homemade turkey broth from last year's turkey. Now, this is obviously not very helpful to those of you that have no turkey broth from last year, but this would be planning for the next year. This is cooked down the carcasses from my turkey last year, cook it down with a bunch of vegetables and sauces and water and broths, and then I put it into a sealed Tupperware container and I froze it. That's how you keep it safe. Don't cook down your turkey, put it into a bucket, and then store it at room temperature next to your jars of urine. That's not smart. And make sure if you do that, that you clearly label urine and broth, because if you mix the two up, I don't think your guests are gonna be very happy. I'm gonna pour that over my innards, cover it all the way, and that's about the water level you want to keep it at. So now that I'm out of turkey broth, as this cooks down, then I'll go to this over the next many hours as we cook it. And it's this simple. You take it over to your stove, you get it on high heat, and you're just gonna let this come to a boil. That's gonna take, depending on your stove, 3 to 8 minutes if you have an electric or a gas stove. Once it boils, we're gonna turn it down to low and let it simmer all day. And keep an eye on it. Every time the water level gets low, then you add more broth. And just keep doing that for however long you can. Like I said, I think I've done it as many as 12 hours. Let it sit overnight, start again in the morning. Then, after all that's done, we'll really get into the gravy making process. Okay, so it's been about 6 to 8 hours. Now, as we get ready to approach the ending of cooking down our innards and our turkey gunk, I want to now move to the part of the turkey gravy that really pisses off foodies and chefs everywhere. Because the right way to make turkey gravy is you wait until your bird is cooked, and then you use the drippings and you make a roux with the flour and the herbs and blah, 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 blah. Now, that's the traditional culinary way to do it, and I've done that, and it's good. But all I care about in the end is great quality product. I don't care how it gets there. This drives people nuts when I tell you that I take this incredibly rich broth that we're about to make and then add in packaged, over-the-counter gravy mix. And believe it or not, it's amazing. It's much quicker and simpler. Thanksgiving dinner in particular, Christmas dinner, whatever. When it's time to serve, everybody's going nuts. They're worried about the turkey getting cold or the mashed potatoes ready, the green bean casserole ready, blah, 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 and now you're trying to scrape up the drippings. People are carving the turkey or the turkeys. The last thing you need to be worried about is the gravy. The beauty of this gravy is it can be made a day or two ahead of time and then just warmed up. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna strain out this gorgeous broth that we've made. Then we're gonna put it back on the stove and we're gonna literally add this over-the-counter gravy mix. Now you'll notice I've got poultry gravy and brown gravy. I like a deep, rich, dark gravy. So I emphasize more on the brown gravy. Think KFC. Huh? Who doesn't love KFC gravy?
ISIS.
That's right. So let's go check on our cooking intestines, gizzards, hearts, things like that. All right, now this has been simmering like this for 6 to 8 hours. And you'll notice the meat that is on there is starting to break up. This could go, you could do it for only 4 hours. You could do it as much as 12. You could actually do this for 18 hours if you wanted to. I don't know if it ever gets to the point of overkill. I'm just tired of staying awake to make these videos, so we're done at about between 6 to 8 hours. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna turn the burner off. We're gonna take this over to the sink, my ghetto sink. Here's what we need. We need a strainer and a measuring cup because now it becomes about measurements. We're gonna pour the liquid into the strainer to get a measurement and also keep all of those disgusting bits of turkey out of there. By the way, don't get all weirded out about the smell. Yes, it's not the greatest smell in the world because you're cooking out turkey hearts and gizzards and all that. Light a candle, fart, do whatever it is you do to make your room smell better. At this point, this part of the turkey is fairly useless. If you hate your dogs, you could feed it to them. If you have some relatives you hate, you could feed it to them. I throw it away at this point. It's been cooked down, there's nothing left in it. Now, we have a measuring cup. This is a 4-cup measuring cup with terribly dated lines of measuring that you can't really see, but I know from experience that is just over 2 cups of pure turkey broth, which goes back in the pan that it was cooked in. And now we're gonna turn this into gravy. So we go back to the stove. Turn the heat back on, we're gonna go with a medium-high heat. Here is a mix of the brown and the poultry gravy that I was showing you earlier. The general formula is 3 tablespoons for every cup of broth. Now that's general because it depends on how thick you like your gravy or how thin you like your gravy. So we're gonna slowly whisk this in using a whisk. That's how you whisk, with a whisk. And what I mean by slowly is, first of all, we wanna bring this back up to heat. We wanna make sure that it gets close to bubbling. The reason you do it slowly is if you just dump this all in, you're gonna have nothing but clumps. And even when we do it slowly, you're probably gonna see some clumping. But trust me, there's a secret and there's a way to get around that. But we just start stirring this. You see the steam coming off it, so it's nice and hot. We're gonna slowly add and whisk. And you don't have to do that little bit. I like to start really small in the beginning to slowly introduce the powdered gravy mix. And yes, you have to constantly stir. And again, keep in mind, you can do this hours before Thanksgiving dinner. This can be done, I always do this Thursday morning. This is one of the things I'm doing at 9, 10 a.m. in the morning, because at that point, everything's been prepped. Then you can set the gravy aside, and when it's like 10, 15 minutes before dinner time, you just heat this back up. And if it's too thick, you add a little bit of broth. If it's too thin, you can add a little bit of more gravy mix. Usually, if you do this right, neither of those things will be necessary. But you don't have to worry about doing this. Oh my God, it's time to eat! Do this ahead of time. Pre-plan and pre-prep as much as you can. And just keep slowly pouring this in. And when you get a little heavy-handed like I just did there, take a break. Whisk, whisk, whisk. And at this point, it's not going to be thickening. You're going to be thinking, oh my God, I don't have enough mix. Rob was wrong. It's not gravy. It's like a Slurpee. Oh my God, Trust me, as it heats up, it's going to thicken, as you'll see here over time. This is about a 3 to 8 minute process, depending on how hot your stove is. I've got it at medium high. And I'm using a gas stove, so it's gonna cook a little hotter and more consistent. If you have an electric stove, that's fine. It just means you're an idiot. All right, keep pouring it in, keep whisking. Now, I can tell because I'm stirring it and looking at it, it's starting to slightly thicken. Some people are still gonna be freaked out. We're only about 90 seconds into this process, give or take. Don't get heavy-handed, you've gotta give this time. We haven't even added in all 6 tablespoons, because remember, it's 3 tablespoons per cup of liquid. And we had about 2 cups of liquid. And not only do you have to add it in slowly, but then you have to make sure you give it time to thicken over the high heat. Medium-high heat, sorry. All right, now we have all 6 tablespoons added in. Let's get it whisked. Also be careful with your whisking. If you go too fast, you're gonna slop it over, start a fire, get your girlfriend, wife, whatever, pissed off. All right, so I'm gonna stop whisking for a minute to show you. We got this good bubbling at about medium. I'm gonna turn to medium low. We're gonna let it kind of congeal a little bit, thicken up, and then decide if we're gonna need more powder. And the way to really do that is to really give this a good 90 to 120 seconds to thicken, because at this point right now, if you're like, oh my god, I gotta serve it, you're gonna add more powder. That's gonna make it, first of all, taste grainy and probably over thicken. That's bad. Give it some time. This is why it's a great dish to prep in advance. All right, we're gonna go over now to the magical microwave timer, because I literally want to make sure this thing has plenty of time to congeal itself. So we're gonna call it about 2 to 3 minutes, which of course you know at Williams Manor means 2 minutes and 22 seconds, because I only like to press one number as many times as possible. That's 2, 2, 2-er. There we go. And then we're gonna check back. Just let it go. Let it simmer, let it bubble. It's at medium-low heat. It's not gonna boil over. And then we're gonna check back. You can see we've got a nice medium-low bubbling simmer. And just by stirring it, I can tell it's not thick enough. Let me just show you. At least it's like how I like my gravy. It shouldn't be like soupy like that. That to me is soup texture. This is too thin, in my opinion, for gravy. Gravy should be a little thicker, more porridgey, gravy. So what do we do? If it was the opposite, if it was way too thick, like if when I picked up the gravy, it was like pudding and it wouldn't come off, then you would add more broth. Turkey or chicken or beef broth, whatever you like. Again, I like a dark gravy, so I would use beef broth. We're not doing that here. So instead, we're going back to our mix of over-the-counter poultry and dark brown gravy mix. And I'm gonna go in half a tablespoon, continue to mix. We're at about medium heat, whisking, whisking, whisking to try to get it to thicken up. Again, this is gonna be another 2 to 5 minutes to make sure we have the right consistency, which is why I implore you to do this ahead of time. If you do this Thursday morning, you're set, because no matter what it looks like later in the day, you can fix it with broth or more mix, and it will fix immediately. Is this annoying? Yes. Do you need to have patience? Yes. Do you want to serve your guests great gravy? I would hope so. So that's what we're doing here. Let's see what we got going on here. Remember, we're looking for a nice, in my opinion, thick consistency. Oh, hello. Hello. Oh. Now, the reason it's so brown, remember, is I like thick, dark gravy, but all gravy matters. If you don't want it this dark, then you're gonna use pure poultry gravy stock and no beef, but that's a good thickness quality, in my opinion, for gravy. Not runny, and you notice, look at this. This is not disgusting. This is gravy goodness. The way it hangs, oh, and then it drops off. We're gonna show you a way that we're gonna thin this out in just a minute. That is some good consistency of gravy. Again, this is not like gelatinous grossness that's hanging off the spoon. That's what we're going for right there. Now, this doesn't really need it, but I want to show you a trick. If you're lucky enough to have $29.99 lying around, this is what's called an immersion blender, or Cuisinart by brand name calls it a Smart Stick. If you have some clumps in your gravy, you just take this, you literally put it into your gravy, and then it's a blender when you turn it on, and you're gonna literally blend up any of the chunks just by going around like this. And you're gonna get rid of any type of poultry or chunky goodness there. It's that simple. It's a really cool tool to have. Every home should have one of these for soups, and again, it's relatively affordable for everybody. So now we're gravy ready, and it's time to pour it into the gravy boat. This is a very simple process. Get a nice little serving boat and serve. again, if you're thinking, oh my God, it's so dark, I'm racist when it comes to gravy, then don't use any brown gravy in your mix. Brandon!
What?
Come here. What do you think here?
It's perfect for me.
Rich,
Yeah,
dark.
rich, very dark.
You like the darker gravy.
Yep. Little salt. It's
Little
good.
salt, maybe a little salt forward, which only comes from the whatever we did when we were mixing down and cooking down the intestines. Not too salty though,
No,
right?
but the richness is perfect.
Yeah. So, and if it was too salty when it turned out, there's a variety of things you can do, which again is why you want to start this early Thanksgiving morning. Like if you got to this point and you went, oh my God, it's too salty, then what you can do is you can use chicken broth and mix. The mix has no sodium in it to add more to it, but no salt to it. And you just pretty much just make more gravy at that point. This, I think I would just serve this the way it is. I mean, that's good for me. Well, that's just good for anyone. That's good gravy. Yeah, you want some?
No, I'm good.